A Jimmy Mathis exclusive, The Stone Zone, featuring Roger Stone, veteran of 30 years in politics and 9 presidential campaigns, including Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, and Donald Trump. Here is Jimmy Mathis on WBAL News Radio 1090 and the WBAL app.
Welcome back to the Jimmy Mathis Show with you till 2 o'clock, 410-467-WBAL. You can hear Roger Stone every Saturday for The Stone Zone, a little bit of a moving target on exactly when we have it. We effort for 11:15, but Roger is a busy man these days. Good morning, Mr. Stone. How you doing today, or good afternoon?
Good morning. I just woke up after a long and hard week. I had to catch up on some Z's, so I did that, and I'm now back in fighting trim.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere. Obviously, a busy week for you, testifying on Capitol Hill. Much anticipation behind that testimony. Just your thoughts on it at 30,000 feet, that we can dive into the weeds. It was closed to the media and to the public. Transcripts were released immediately following it. You held a press conference on the Hill. Just your personal takeaways from last Tuesday, I believe.
You know, generally speaking, Jimmy, I think you'd rather have a root canal. This was almost a 4-hour process, and of course it took intense preparation because I expected to have memorized every Facebook posting, every tweet, every twist and turn of the 2016 election. But I answered all of the questions in a forthright and honest answer. There was one question I declined to answer, which I'm entitled to do so because I was not there under subpoena, and I had no obligation to answer any questions for that matter, and therefore I was appearing voluntarily. The Republicans were, I think, very businesslike and very focused on the actual mission of the committee, which is to determine whether I had any evidence or knowledge of any effort by anyone in the Trump orbit, the Trump family, the Trump campaign, Trump associates, Trump friends, Trump himself, to coordinate, collude, or otherwise conspire with the Russians or any Russian front or Russian company or Russian individual or the Russian state to affect the outcome of the 2016 election. The answer is resoundingly no.
And Roger, what was the one question that you wouldn't answer?
Quite simply, on July 21st of last year, Julian Assange put up a tweet in which he said, essentially, that he had the goods on Hillary Clinton and that he would publish them. I asked a journalist who I know had interviewed Assange to please try to seek confirmation of that information before I reported it at InfoWars and in my syndicated radio show, The Stone Cold Truth, and in my weekly column at stonecoldtruth.com. And he did confirm that, and he reiterated that confirmation through most of August, September, and of course in early October, that material was published. Because that conversation was off the record, it was a privileged conversation, I declined to give the name of that journalist. I think most journalists covering this matter would understand. Mr. Schiff, who is just as bug-eyed and weird in public as he is in private, says that I'll be subpoenaed, but he, of course, doesn't have the unilateral authority to subpoena anyone. He would need a vote of the entire committee. Now, if the committee does elect to subpoena me, I will decide what to do at that time. Many, many, many hypothetical questions, like what will you do if we, and see, politics does not work that way. You don't answer hypothetical questions. I would be loath to drop the journalistic shield for this individual because I gave my word. I think any reporter who understands the situation would agree with me. If I'm compelled to do so with the threat of a jail cell, I'll confront that question when I come to it. I'm not sure why it's all that important, by the way, because Assange did have the material, and he did publish it, and it did show that John Podesta and Hillary Clinton were both corrupt and belong in prison. So I'm not really sure what the issue is. Other than to say... Can
we pump the brakes for 1 second, Roger? Because I got one question on that. So were you not previously aware of the John Podesta emails?
Absolutely not. And I made it very clear that I had no advanced knowledge that Podesta's email would be hacked. I did provide the committee with an exhaustive memo on the crooked business dealings of John Podesta that was written on August 1st, which I read and which I can read, all of which, Jimmy, most of which, came from the Panama Papers published in January of 2016. So the fact that John Podesta is a crook was not unknown. The fact that John Podesta was making millions off of the oligarchs around Putin, this was not a deep secret.
Right.
I knew all these things. And I knew, because I would be giving them to the media in the fall, that they would get printed. And they did. I.e., Podesta's time in the barrel. Translation, Podesta's time under scrutiny. Like when the Wall Street Journal reported the $35 million that he made off of Putin. And Bloomberg.com. Never anywhere do I predict the hacking of his email. Podesta lies when he said that to the committee. Schiff is lying when he says it to committee. Let me say it slowly so even those who may be not with us or not quite awake, I had no advance knowledge of the hacking of John Podesta's email, and there is no evidence whatsoever that I did.
Just to clarify the record, because you and I go back a little ways right now. It's funny, I blink my eyes, and I think we've been doing this for 2 years now. Coming into the general election, was there any direct contact between you and Goofister 2.0?
I had no direct contact with either with WikiLeaks or Julian Assange during the election year. My one exchange with Goofister 2.0, who I do not concede is a Russian cutout. Why, if he's a Russian cutout, why is the software that he's using registered to an employee of the Democratic National Committee? That's an indisputable fact. One of the things that's interesting about our intelligence services is they think if you repeat something, just an assertion, like a claim, enough times that makes it a fact. Like, Jimmy has green hair. Jimmy has green hair. Jimmy has green hair. Right. Jimmy has green hair. You see, the intelligence services have said it. Jimmy has green hair. But it doesn't make it true. It just makes it tedious, and they are very tedious. They have no proof whatsoever of involvement by anyone associated with Donald Trump with the Russians. None whatsoever, other than the Donald Trump Jr. meeting, which is clearly a setup because they can't explain how this Russian woman lawyer got into the country without a visa, other than the fact that the Obama administration let her in order to set Donald Jr. up in a meeting which broke no laws and achieved nothing. Nice try.
So, Roger, the point, you voluntarily went to the Hill this past week for this testimony. There's been back and forth on working at the logistics of it. The reason that you wanted to do this was to clear your name. That was your personal interest in doing this. Again, you were there voluntarily. You were not under subpoena. At the end of the day, did you personally accomplish what you wanted to on this?
I think so. Let's go through the big three. Stone knew about Podesta's email being hacked in advance. No, I didn't. Stone knew the source and the content of the WikiLeaks disclosures about Hillary. No, I did not. No evidence to the contrary. Stone was in touch with a Russian hacker named Goofister 2.0. One, he's probably not a Russian hacker. Two, the full substance of that exchange was made public in the hearing. It's benign. It shows proof of nothing. It shows proof of no coordination. It shows proof of no collusion. It all happened weeks after WikiLeaks had already published the controversial material from the Clinton campaign. Ergo, collusion over the theft of that material would be impossible unless, of course, I owned a time machine, which I don't.
So the only reason...
Yeah, I think I accomplished the three things that I set out to accomplish. Plus, I wanted to see this beady-eyed weirdo, this beady-eyed weirdo, Mr. Schiff, up close, and I have. I don't know if it's Ritalin or what, but this guy looks wide awake, if you know what I mean.
So speaking of Adam Schiff, immediately after your testimony, he had floated at the idea about issuing a subpoena to bring you back to Capitol Hill. That's easier said than done, obviously.
Yeah.
But
I'm looking at a subpoena for him because of the fundraiser he held with an Iranian arms dealer in Beverly Hills. We need to ask him about that there will be an ethics complaint filed in the Congress against him. I do think he needs to be subpoenaed to answer questions about that.
And finally, on the testimony, just looking at Paul Manafort, what do you think the odds are of him actually being indicted in this whole thing?
Well, I actually, I'm glad you asked, Jim, because I did have one misstatement. I was under the impression that my attorneys had learned from Paul Manafort's attorneys that he would imminently be indicted. That was a misimpression. My attorneys learned from certain documents that they have now seen that he will be indicted. So I was incorrect in that, and I stand corrected, but the sum result remains the same. I expect his indictment on some superfluous charge that is not related to the Russians to be imminent. It's a tool. In other words, Manafort, we have you for double parking. We're going to prosecute you unless you admit that you were colluding with the Russians and Donald Trump knew everything.
Right.
We're going to send you to jail for jaywalking unless you tell us that you were in bed with Vladimir Putin and that Donald Trump approved it all. In other words, Manafort, we want you to lie. We want you to bear false witness against the President of the United States. I'm not sure people understand Paul Manafort's family name is Manaforte. He's an Italian-American. He's tough as nails, and he's not going to lie or roll over on the President of the United States. Just not going to do it.
Well, you speak about jail time, Roger. You have people that are floating that rhetoric out when it comes to you last week.
Well, that's fine. That's also never going to happen because I must tell you, the really easy thing about these hearings is all you have to do is go there and tell the truth.
Right.
Nothing to memorize other than your own tweets. All I had to do was go there and tell the truth. And the truth is, I had no advanced knowledge of the hacking of Podesta's email. I had no advanced knowledge of the source or content of the WikiLeaks disclosures. And my conversation with Goosefer 2.0, if he really even exists, or even if that is really a person, is benign, meaningless. We know what the substance of the conversation is, and it doesn't prove anything.
But just so we're clear, you're saying there was no conversation, correct?
Well, it's an exchange on Twitter.
Okay.
It's just an exchange of messages which I've published. They begin August 14th and they end September 9th. But
beyond social media, there was no direct contact between you and Lucifer 2.0. Roger,
none
quickly before I let you go, obviously the big news yesterday, Secretary Tom Price from HHS resigning, Donald Trump basically saying that he was on the chopping block if he did not voluntarily resign. Obamacare, the future of the Affordable Care Act, nothing legislatively probably happens with that. Now we have a new Secretary of Health and Human Services. And we can kind of do a 1-2 punch on this, where the administration goes forward when it comes to comprehensive tax reform. And obviously, one of the big ticket items from this administration on the very beginning was the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. With Secretary Price gone, just sort of your thoughts politically where all these chainsaws are.
Well, here's a sleeper, Jimmy. The president has announced that he's going to issue an executive order on the health insurance issue.
Right.
And that is coming up, and I understand that they're looking at doing something truly revolutionary, which will address the Obamacare problem. If the Congress cannot get it done, it appears that they cannot, that doesn't mean the president can't get it done. He's got enormous powers in this area. Let's see what they put up.
Roger Stone, always a pleasure, especially this week. Roger Stone, former Donald Trump top advisor, author of his newest book, Making of the President. Roger, it was a pleasure having you here in Baltimore. A busy week, and I look forward to talking to you next week. People that want to learn more about you, the site for Stone Zone.
Well, Jimmy, one thing I should mention, and that is my legal bills have now hit $500,000 between the phony lawsuit filed against me by the Obama folks over the election and these Senate and House hearings, and therefore folks who want to help can go to StoneDefenseFund.com. Some friends of mine have set up a legal defense fund. You can go to StoneDefenseFund.com, or you can go to WhoFramedRogerStone.com. But I appreciate any assistance from patriots who want to help.
And Roger, just real quick, what are the odds that you get subpoenaed and you go back to the Hill, or do you think this is all in the rearview mirror right now?
I think it's possible. I will deal with a subpoena if one is proffered, but that remains to be seen.
All right.
Again, it's centered around one narrow question, and that is whether I'm going to give up a journalist that I have talked to on a privileged basis. There's a lot of case law on this, but you understand the shield.
Yes.
So we shall see.
All right. Roger Stone for the Stone Zone every Saturday here on the Jimmy Mathis Show. Roger, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time.
Great to be here.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Roger Stone. Quick break. We'll be right back. You're listening to the Jimmy Mathis Show on WBL News Radio 1090.